Welcome everybody to the first virtual council meeting of Norwich City Council. This meeting is being held under the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panel Meetings England and Wales Regulations 2020, meaning that decisions made will have the same validity as those made at the meeting held at City Hall. We have elected members of the council at the meeting today. We also have the council's monitoring officer and director of resources as part of the meeting, as well as democratic services staff to record the votes. Members must be able to hear and, where practical, see other members. Therefore, we ask all members to keep their video on during the business of the meeting. A recording of this meeting will appear on the council's YouTube channel, and the meeting will be live streamed. If we are notified by our colleague in IT that the link is not working, we will take a short adjournment while the issue is resolved. Can I ask participants to ensure that they are muted when not speaking? You may be muted by an officer to maintain audio quality. Oh, sorry, I think we're going to have to pause already. Okay. Oh, right. Okay, we have 3 people who can't hear.
We're very close.
Oh. It's on maximum volume here. Oh, right. Where is it? Yeah.
Well, I think you come in through fine. I think it's them. But they've got to be able to hear. So
Yep.
can we ask them to check their volume maybe in there?
Yeah. Can I ask councillors to check the volume? If everyone's got the volume, those are 3 that are not hearing it properly, you can turn it up if it's possible. Yeah. And you've got one thumb up, that's all. Yeah.
Can you just ask if they can all hear before we come on?
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Say yes? Yeah. Anyone can't? Can't. Are we there yet? Yeah. Okay. Right. That's the muted bit. The chat function is enabled for members to report technical difficulties and to indicate that they would like to speak on an item, but you will only be able to message the chair and democratic services. Where possible, groups have sent through lists of members who wish to speak on an item, and I will read these out at the appropriate point in the item. If you wish to speak on an item, please use the chat function to indicate during the item. Please do not indicate via chat for future items. Voting will be done using raised hand. I will ask at the appropriate time, you raise your hand clearly in front of your screen and keep it there until I announce the number of votes. Please bear with us while we count the votes, as this may take a little longer than usual as officers check between screens to ensure all members have been seen. I suggest that we have a short comfort break of 5 minutes after about an hour at the most convenient point around this time. And I've received apologies from Councillor Ryan. Lord Mayor's announcements have only been 3 during the lockdown due to the pandemic. The 3 were the city service, which was a virtual city service at the Norwich Cathedral, and also a civic association meeting, and also I did lay a wreath at the War Memorial on the D-Day Memorial, which I did lay myself. The EDP got that one wrong. It wasn't laid on my behalf. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest to make on any items on the agenda? Okay. Questions from the public?
Sorry, I had my hand up, Lord Mayor.
Right. So, Councillor Stannard.
I've got a conflict of interest, non-pecuniary, on item 7.
Item 7.
Yep. Can I also declare an interest
Okay.
on item 7?
Councillor Kendrick on item 7. Okay, thank you. Item 3, questions from the public. There are no public questions, none have been received for this meeting. Petitions, no petitions have been received for this meeting. So we're on to item 4, minutes. I call upon Councillor Waters to move the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of March 2020.
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Schmierer to second the minutes, as Councillor Vogeline wasn't present at that meeting.
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now move to a vote. Can I ask that only those members present at the meeting of the Council on the 17th of March 2020 take part in this vote? I know this is unusual, but if you remember, the meeting in March was minimised but quorate to meet the response to the pandemic restrictions before the actual lockdown. So all those in favour, if you just show your hand. Keep it there until we say otherwise. Let's see who haven't washed their hands before they came to the meeting. Oh, Councillor Maxwell, you haven't got your video on. Councillor Maxwell, can you confirm that you're voting in favour? No. We've got a figure for that. That's 15 for. Those against? Nope. Nope. Come on. Abstentions? This is to confirm after the vote. All those, basically, those are the words at the meeting. Okay. 23 abstentions. Right. Confirm the resolution has been carried. Thank you. That's item 4 for there. Item 5, questions to Cabinet members and committee chairs. There are 4 questions from members of the Council to Cabinet members, of which notice has been given in accordance with the provisions of Appendix 1 of the Council's Constitution. A copy will be available on the Council's website. Members who have asked questions are permitted to put a supplementary question to the Cabinet member. So, question 1. Councillor Carlo, do you have a supplementary question? Councillor Carlo?
I'm muting this one. Yes, please, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Councillor Carlo.
Is that better?
Yep, that's it. I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Councillor Stoddard, for your response. My question is, given that Norwich is a regional capital, do you agree that the County Council's emasculation of the City Council on transport and highways is unacceptable?
Thank you. Councillor Stoddard?
Thank you. It's certainly highly regrettable. In terms of unacceptable, it is their decision to make, and we are now being treated the same as every single other district council. I think given our status as a large city in a large urban area, which is distinct from every other town in the county and have particular needs, particularly around highways and transportation and moving people around, and the contribution that makes to the local economy, but also the way we manage it, the contribution it makes to the environment as well, and the expertise that we had built up in that area in our own city council highways team, I think it's highly regrettable that the decision was taken to remove the highways agency agreement. And of course, I'm mindful of the fact that way back in the early days of the district council, after Norwich ceased to be a county district, there was tension between the county council and Norwich City Council over highways matters. And one of the reasons for setting up NHAC was to avoid that tension, so that we could have discussions and joint agreements and avoid litigation, which is something which in the past had also been the case. And I do fear that the lessons which led to that have been forgotten. And I do feel it's highly regrettable that now Norwich's the people of Norwich and their locally elected representatives have far less say on highways matters in the city than they did. We had a very good arrangement. And of course, when you look at the highways committee at County Council, I mean, you will see that it's predominantly made up of councillors from rural areas. And that means that people who don't have an expertise in matters affecting the city and are not close to those matters affecting the city are the people who are making those decisions. And I think that's highly regrettable as well. I mean, under the Highways Agency Agreement, we were able to agree bipartisan policies with the administration at County Hall. We were able to find ways of agreement and of working together very successfully to get large government grants, for example, for things like the pedalways, and also the right to bid against the Transforming Cities Fund. And one of the reasons we got that was because although we're not a unitary, we had that close partnership which existed through NHAC. So I agree with you, it's highly regrettable. I'm not sure I'll go as far as using the word unacceptable, because I guess in their terms, they have made a decision which is in their power to make, and they're treating us exactly the same way as any other district council. Although I agree with you, there are very, very good reasons why they shouldn't do so.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Stonard. Question 2, Councillor Bogline, do you have a supplementary question? No. You're still muted, Councillor Bogline. You can't hear you. Can you unmute Councillor Bogline? I still can't hear you. No.
I think you have to take the microphone off.
Can you unplug your headset and speak directly to the computer? I think you still need to unplug it. Still can't hear you. Odd, we did hear you earlier, didn't we?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we'll try it like this then. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. And
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Water. I fully agree with the list of measures that you have highlighted in your response and their urgency. But in my view, the Council's role in helping to make this happen, including through its role as an important partner, can be much greater, and we cannot rely on central government showing a similar understanding of the need and urgency. I would also like to clarify quickly that the motion Councillor Waters is referring to was actually passed in early 2019. And in this motion, the Council also asked Cabinet to report to Council within 6 months with the actions the Cabinet will take to address this emergency. It is now 18 months on and we still haven't seen such an action plan. So, and I'm saying unless the revised environmental strategy has really dramatically changed and delivers this, I will ask again, will Norwich City Council publish a strategic plan that sets out clearly how the Council will kickstart a local green economy and address the climate emergency, including a breakdown of how the different actions will add up to achieving the 13% year-on-year emission reduction that is required for Norwich?
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Well, thank you, Councillor Bergeline. There is, of course, the environment strategy, which is coming forward next month. It's obviously referenced and embedded in the document we're going to be discussing on the recovery. What I would add, of course, is that that document has been widely consulted on. It has involved members of the Green Group. There is a local climate change and sustainability panel which the Greens are represented on. And their views have always been taken into account in terms of framing our environmental and sustainability strategy. So your question struck me as slightly odd, only insofar as it seemed that there had been no engagement with that process or no familiarity with the very ambitious targets recognised nationally, as you know, in a number of instances, with a very strong record, for example, on carbon reduction. So I think I can reassure you and give you the pleasure of knowing that you will be having the opportunity to look at a very comprehensive and ambitious report. But having said that, it is important for central government to move and resource and change and develop some of its policies alongside local government. We can lead central government and show them the way, but they have the resources to make a difference at the national level, and we must continue to encourage them to do that.
Thank you. On to question 3. Councillor Lovett, do you have a supplementary question?
I'm afraid I haven't seen the actual answer to my question, so I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. But I would ask of Councillor Stannard.
Would you like me to read the answer out?
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
With permission, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, by all means.
Okay. I agree with Councillor Lubbott that it's been good to see the increase in cycling and walking since March, and I share her desire to see this result in a more enduring change in people's behaviour when economic activity properly resumes. The ending of the Highways Agency agreement in March means that the County Council has assumed a more dominant role in determining what happens to the transport network. Nevertheless, we are striving to work closely with them to agree measures that could be taken to create better infrastructure. Positive examples of this are the consultation on changes to Exchange Street and St Benedict Street using temporary traffic regulation orders, and the Transforming Cities Fund submission that, if supported by the DFT with funding, will result in a large amount of investment in walking and cycling across the city over the next 3 years. We will continue to use our influence with the county to promote the importance of active travel.
Then my supplementary, thank you very much. Then my supplementary would be, do you think that the closure of 2 roads and minor changes is adequate to address the issue of increased cycling? Wouldn't you want to be more ambitious and in closing, taking the opportunity to close more roads and to have more cycle lanes and wider footpaths?
I want us to take every opportunity that arises from the situation and to be as ambitious as possible. We, in order to put in place more facilities for cycling and walking, it does take a degree of planning and foresight, and then modelling, and then funding. So you may be aware that when we built the pedalways in the city and created extra space for cyclists and also for pedestrians, there was a great deal of pre-planning. There was also a great deal of consultation, and also we needed to access the funds in order to do that. So I think if we're going to implement changes which are long-lasting, which are sustainable and achieve the ends that we want to, and I completely agree with you on that, then I think we need to be planning it carefully and not rushing into such measures at this time, because we're likely to make mistakes if we do that. So we need to be serious about it, and we need to be looking at things like the Transforming Cities programme, which is is going to make a huge difference in terms of public transport use and cycling and walking. And we also need to, if we are going to start making changes, we need to do it experimentally, as we are proposing to do on Exchange Street and St Benedict's. And those changes in themselves are complex, because once you start shutting off traffic from a street, or once you start making a street one way in two different directions, you change other traffic flows in the city, and there are implications for that. Particularly, one example I'll give you is in closing off St Benedict's the way that we are, making it one way in two different directions. It still needs to be possible for very large Tesco delivery lorries to get along there up Wellington Lane, down Pottergate and to the rear of Tesco, or Tesco won't get deliveries. So we needed to think very, very carefully. We can't just close off a road without thinking very carefully about it. That's something that we've done. So I'm saying I agree with you, but we need to do it properly, and we need to make sure it's planned properly and funded properly so that it's sustainable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Lovett, I can't see you. Your video is not on. Yes, you can make an adjustment there.
Yeah.
Okay, question 4. Councillor Button, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No supplementary, but thanks to Councillor Waters and officers for such a good question answered. Thank you.
Thank you. If we move on to item 6, COVID-19, the Council's response and the blueprint recovery. I call upon Councillor Waters to move item 6.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. First of all, can I thank the opposition groups on the council for agreeing to make this the focus of tonight's council meeting and streamlining some of the other items. It's really important that we debate issues which are relevant to our local residents at a particularly difficult time for everybody in the city. So this report has been taken to Cabinet. It's been to Scrutiny Committee. There are some recommendations from Scrutiny Committee which have been appended to the report, and it helps me make a point which I think is particularly important, which is that this is a working document. And we're not certain how things are going to unfold, and it is going to require the mobilisation of the whole of the city, as well as government, to play a decisive and positive role in taking us forward. So the report really is in two elements. The first is a record of the Council's initial response to the virus, and then the priority themes and actions that will frame the city's recovery. And of course, we're in a sort of transitional moment between a public health emergency which remains and will continue with us for the foreseeable future, and the need when public health provisions allow for some gradual and careful opening of the city, though it requires everybody in the city to take care of themselves and to make sure they take every sensible protection. So the Council's initial response has been one of mobilising the staff at City Hall, many people taking on different roles to respond to the immediate pressures that people were facing. So the establishment, for example, of the Community Response Hub, which was set up at St Andrew's Blackfriars Hall, and had made, by the end of May, nearly 6,000 welfare calls, 600 emergency food parcels, 500 emergency medicine drops. We have been a conduit for government money to businesses. So over 2,800 businesses by June had received £36.5 million. And there is a discretionary grant scheme which closes on the 30th of June, and that's been set up. We've had to reorganise the staff. Many people are now working from home, and we've managed to maintain the parks and green spaces to give people opportunities to exercise during the lockdown, but adhering to the social distancing requirements. This is a strategy which is really taking a partnership approach, and it utilises what has been a very successful and developing overarching City Vision 2040 partnership. And that will steer us through the challenges and opportunities ahead. So what are the things that we are looking to in this recovery phase? Well, the first thing is that we need to be well-resourced to carry out the functions that we have. Let us remember that we have been, local government collectively, we locally have been the key partner of government in getting through this very difficult time. And the government needs to compensate the council fully for the impact of COVID-19. We also need to be thinking about how we deliver our services going forward, the interaction with our residents, much of it now driven by technology, is something that we can capitalise on. What has been a common theme is supporting the most vulnerable people in the city, homelessness, working with the Pathways programme. It's been a very successful programme, and also helping to make people move out of poverty. And that's work that has made significant progress in this period. And we hope that some of the changes that the government have done to relax some of the constraints on welfare budgets continue. There's a big piece of work going on currently about physical distancing and signage and so on, and other colleagues will talk about that later in the discussion. But it's really important that we help to regenerate the economy. So housing is central to that. We have the prospect of council homes on Mile Cross, a number of other developments, particularly with through NRL, our regeneration company, and also the master planning is being done for the East Norwich area, which has the potential to create 4,000 new homes and 6,000 jobs. Arts, culture and heritage are a particular focus that have been particularly hit hard. And then we have the work that we've done around climate change and the green economy, and that will be brought together with the environment strategy, which will be coming forward in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And we need to harness the social capital of the city. And we need to think about how we mobilise all the residents and businesses and community groups across Norwich. There is a third element to this, Lord Mayor, and it is this pivotal point in our history. And I guess there have been 3 pivotal points, and this is one of them. But going back to 1945, we had a pivotal point at which, frankly, the debt that the country faced was much higher than the current costs of this pandemic. But that built the welfare state. It challenged the country to deal with Beveridge's 5 evils: want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And the reality of that particular model, I have to say, requires us, I think, to have a modern Beveridge. And a modern Beveridge would be one that did similar to the Beveridge report of the 1940s, which was to make an impact across a broad range of areas. They did it successfully. We need to do the same. So it seems to me we do, Lord Mayor, have a choice between a 1945 model, or we have a choice which continues on from the last time before this crisis, of the global financial crash, which led to 10 years of austerity, when local government was not a partner of central government, but was actually the first call on cutting public expenditure. The COVID virus has amplified the inequalities in our society, the challenges that many people have lived with over at least the last decade. And we need to address those. We need a new imagination. We need a government to be a full partner with local government and other key institutions, because it will only be government in its different forms and public services that will actually provide the framework for moving forward to a better place. We've got to know each other better. We've understood the lives of others. There's been social solidarity. We must capitalise on those opportunities. We must facilitate those possibilities, and we must argue for government to join us in making a new beverage rather than an old austerity. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Yes. I call on Councillor Harris to second the item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'm very happy to second this item, and I will speak at this occasion. I'm really proud to be part of a council which has risen to the many challenges that COVID-19 has thrown at our residents, and we're now looking forward to recovery. I'm proud to be part of a council which is not working in isolation and is working with residents, volunteers, councillors, businesses, partnerships and councils across the county to get us to the point where we have this paper in front of us, a point where we have a blueprint for the way forward. As a city, we have a debt of gratitude to our key workers. As a councillor, I have to thank the very hard work of all our staff who have worked tirelessly to do the very best for our community. We are being asked to approve the blueprint and action plan as a way forward for the council and the city. This shows real leadership, unlike the disjointed and muddled messages that the Tory government is giving out. We most certainly have a plan, and we are way ahead of many authorities. The lives of our residents have been turned upside down by COVID-19, and our staff have risen to the challenge of providing much needed services in a different way, especially for the most vulnerable in our city. Looking forward, there is much to do. Our budget has most certainly taken a beating, with this Tory government failing to deliver on the initial promise of spend what you need to deal with the pandemic, moving to the narrative of telling us that we're all here to share the burden. So far, the money received has not been particularly generous, but we await with anticipation for any more money that they might send our way. As Councillor Waters has already mentioned, this is a detailed paper, a live document, and it's been through Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee. There are opportunities as a result of COVID-19, and there are most certainly challenges. One should not underestimate the enormity of the task. We can modernise how the council works for the benefit of both residents and staff. During the last 3 months, we've had to be flexible in our approach, and the customer services team have played a key role in that. We must build on the good work that has come out of dealing with this crisis. The work around supporting rough sleepers is an excellent example of this. We need to find sustainable solutions. There is the challenge of the HRA budget and the issue of ever-increasing rent arrears. These are certainly difficult times for many people. During the last 3 months, we have continued to undertake emergency repairs for our tenants, but now we're beginning to deal with the backlog of non-essential repairs. Our choice-based letting system has resumed, and we have ambitious plans to build more much-needed sustainable council homes and communities, to build to high environmental standards and to pilot modern methods of construction. Building more council homes has not been seen to be a priority of any Tory government. However, an article in The Guardian at the weekend made some compelling economic points around building new social housing, about the wider benefits to the local economy, about savings to government on housing benefit. We know that any new social housing development will generate jobs, will provide much needed secure tenancies, and will most definitely be an important driver in kickstarting our local economy. This is about homes and economic regeneration. So let's continue to all pull together. Our recovery plan is just the beginning. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Now I'd like to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Fogline.
You can't hear me again? You can hear me? Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you. I think all of us want to start this debate by paying tribute to everyone in the city and beyond who has worked so hard during this difficult time. So many key workers have turned up to work every day to make sure that the essential parts of our lives continue, and I would like to express my deepest appreciation for them. I often hear the argument that people are just selfish. As a social psychologist, I could not disagree more. Cooperation is imprinted into our nature, and I think this pandemic has revealed this positive part of our nature in so many ways. Neighbours have helped each other out, mutual aid groups have sprung up all across Norwich, hundreds of volunteers were recruited, and officers jumped into completely different job roles without hesitation. We called on each other to check everyone is okay. We showed superhuman powers in raising our children literally at the same time as doing our jobs. And with each other's help, we've entered into many new technologies. In short, we were there for each other, and the blueprint is very right in treasuring this spirit by looking at how we can take the positives forward. The section on harnessing social capital is so important and very promising. Similarly, while we may all be a little zoomed out by now, the Council is right to look at the opportunities that this different way of working presents for the future. I personally am very keen to continue with some element of virtual meetings, even beyond any risk of the coronavirus, potentially some form of hybrid meetings, as well as the option to continue to live stream meetings. I think this will open up democracy more, not only to the wider public, but also to people who may find it difficult to take part in physical meetings due to work commitments, caring responsibilities, or disabilities. Giving the option of attending physically or virtually will further reduce barriers to participate in our ongoing democratic processes. There is a lot more positive that I could say about this recovery blueprint. We can clearly praise the Council's quick and thorough response in many areas, as well as the fact that Norwich City is one of the first councils to publish a blueprint for recovery. And in many ways, this is a very positive and forward-looking blueprint, which is why I will be supporting the overall vision of it tonight. However, there are some areas in this blueprint that need further strengthening if we want to ensure that we build a better, more sustainable and kinder future out of this recovery. The Council's response to this pandemic shows that dynamic change can happen and can happen incredibly quickly, that the Council is able to set a clear agenda and co-produce change together with businesses and communities. This is exactly the attitude we need to take when we look at the green economy. This Council needs to deliver dynamic change, locally driven, co-produced with businesses and communities now. Investing in skills for the future, in business sectors that enable producing and sharing renewable energy, retrofitting or cutting-edge low-carbon technology will be key for future-proofing this Council, the Council's incomes, as well as jobs for Norwich residents. The country can't get back to business as usual. There will be much less jobs in business as usual, and business as usual would mean running straight towards the next big crisis, the climate and ecological crisis. So while it is great to see climate change and the green economy as a separate theme in this blueprint, the content needs to be much more ambitious. One of these opportunities lies in reviewing our commercial investment strategy. The millions we invest in different properties to create rental income. The criteria to select these properties are based on a dated economic model, and we believe they take an unsustainable view of what can create income. We have long argued that these criteria need to look at creating co-benefits by investing in sustainable sectors such as renewable energy provision or sustainable business models. The leader of the Council has previously stated that while he may not particularly like the current economic model, we are bound to work within it. We are not. We can make sure that the millions we invest as a Council help transitioning out of it into a green economy. Let's put our money into more sustainable investments. We will find out next month how much of a financial hit the Council has taken from the pandemic on its investment portfolio, and I hope that the Council will see this as an opportunity to recalibrate its financial investment strategy. Many of the points I am making here have been discussed at what I see as one of the most productive scrutiny meetings I have seen in this Council. And for anyone who wants to convince themselves, here is a little promotion of the Council's new YouTube channel where you can all rewatch it. These points have been put forward as recommendations to the Cabinet, and I will keep a very close eye on how they are being responded to and when. I really hope that Cabinet will take the variety of really valuable recommendations that have come out of the scrutiny meeting to navigate where this blueprint needs to go next. Thank you.
Right, that was muted. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to begin by acknowledging the unprecedented challenges that have faced the country, city and council over the last 3 months. The council officers have scaled up well to face the daunting task, housing the homeless, supporting the vulnerable, keeping the bins emptied and ensuring that parks were safe for people to exercise. And the people of Norwich have played an important role in following the scientific advice that came as part of lockdown by staying home to protect others. The report notes that although the death rate in Norwich has been relatively low, the impact on the local economy and people's way of life has been significant. I've seen firsthand from work the impact that lockdown life has had on children kept away from school, and how the failure of the Tories in central government to adequately feed them has been outrageous. Such is the nature of the report that we are discussing tonight, that even in the last few hours, an announcement from Westminster could have significant positive impact on local businesses and for families to meet again once more. Although this is the first council since March, and outwardly it could look as though as a council we have had nothing to say during that time, I would like to thank the leader and the chief executive for facilitating regular meetings, initially every few days, throughout this time to keep opposition group leaders in the loop about the developing response. The document before us this evening is comprehensive and is an impressive piece of work given the significant changes to working practices that have been in place over the last 12 weeks. I'm particularly pleased to see the reference to consider the lessons learned and apply them to the service over the longer term, as all too often organisations fail to do this. Many of these lessons can help the council respond faster should we see wave 2 later in the year requiring such interventions. Paragraphs 440 and 441 talk about the amounts of grants that the council had paid out to eligible businesses. The grants were of course significant for businesses that needed the money, but there are important questions for central government about the overall management of this scheme. Unlike the furlough scheme, where eligible employees had to stop work for businesses to receive money, these grants of either 10,000 or 25,000 were paid out irrespective of whether the business had experienced any detriment to their business. Government should have been more prepared to target money where it was most needed. By necessity, the City Council can only act to assist business, but the report notes the Council's role as an anchor institution can support in an inclusive economy through use of council assets, contractual recruitment and procurement levers. What I would like to see is specific support for non-retail facing smaller businesses. The report feels heavy on the importance of the city centre, referencing the work of the BID and Norfolk Chambers of Commerce, but we must not lose track of the vital small business sector, many of whom are tucked away in smaller states but heavily impacted by the shrinking economy. As chair of the Scrutiny Committee, I would like to thank committee members who spent 3 hours discussing this report a couple of weeks ago. Far more time than we can spend this evening, but their work produced a number of recommendations that you can read in para 2 of the accompanying report. We look forward to continuing to support the city's recovery and developing this document further as the year progresses. Thank you.
Thank you. I've received a notice that the members have expressed an interest in wanting to contribute to this discussion, and I would just like to remind other members to use the chat function to indicate if they want to contribute. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Lord Chair. And I think I'll echo what others have said, but I think this is a really positive step forward, this recovery document. I just want to pick up on something that Councillor Bogerland mentioned about the commercial investment strategy. And a couple of weeks ago at the scrutiny meeting, I asked about the council's commercial investment strategy. And the leader of the council replied then that he had been anticipating the question, which is not surprising, I thought, given that the properties that the council has spent tens of millions of pounds on over the last couple of years are now looking very precarious indeed as investments. I'm sure I don't need to mention the Harlow Travelodge. What I did find surprising is that a review of those commercial investments was not included in the blueprint document that we're discussing today. And I would ask, does the council not consider that they are now potentially a major liability? Of course, we all know that councils have been forced to take on investments due to brutal cuts by the government. And so I was glad to hear Councillor Waters saying that he would continue to lobby for a changed financial settlement, a better financial settlement for councils. I think that's something we can all agree on. But Councillor Waters also said that the administration would look at commercial investments based on the opportunities that come up. And this again speaks to something that Councillor Bogerland was raising about driving the green economy. And I think it's surprising that the council has so far seem to ignore one of the most promising options, that is investing in renewable energy. Recently, both West Berkshire and Warrington Borough Councils have launched what they call community municipal bonds, giving residents and others the chance to invest as little as £5 in projects such as solar power for schools and on other public buildings. Those community municipal bonds offer help to fund the transition to a green economy. They provide local jobs right now when we know that they're so desperately needed, and they provide a safe and long-term financial return for both the council and the community. I've sent the information about this to Councillor Kendrick, and I want to ask straight up whether this is something the council will consider. I think finally, I just want to add that I agree with Councillor Waters's comment at scrutiny a couple of weeks ago that we are heading into a changed economy. And so I want to stress again that we cannot continue to follow outdated investment models. Instead, I urge the council to listen to some of the proposals that Greens have been advocating for years and use its investment power to actively create a better, more secure, more local economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Council's Blueprint for Recovery document has a focus on positive opportunities, which is to be commended. One key element of the document is the formation of the East Norwich Partnership, looking at a master plan for redeveloping 3 brownfield sites for residential-led mixed use, with the potential to create 4,000 new homes and 6,000 new jobs. At this month's Cabinet meeting, the terms of reference were approved. In the terms of reference, it was agreed to form a partnership of stakeholders. There is also a secondary wider reference group. Neither of these 2 groups include local ward councillors or local resident groups. The Green Group leader asked for the terms of reference to be amended to include ward councillors and local resident groups, but the Cabinet decided against taking this opportunity. I believe this to be a mistake because it's vitally important to seek the views of local residents who will be directly impacted by the development and learn from their experience and knowledge of the area, and to gather a wider picture of the infrastructure requirements that will benefit both the existing and new community. Community cohesion will be stronger if these links are developed in the first instance. Ward councillors are a vital link between the council and the local community. We are the human face and ear of a large faceless organisation. The Blueprint for Recovery document stated that it's crucial to consult and engage with a range of partners, including residents, to ensure that future plans are comprehensive and that the city feels connected to the recovery. It goes on to say that the council will also use a variety of communications, including resident consultations and the use of ward councillors to gather views. Stage 1 of the master plan is about identifying infrastructure requirements. This should be a blue sky forum of ideas and should have the participation of local residents and councillors right from the start. In the spirit of the Blueprint's attempts at community engagement in decision making, I would like to receive an assurance today that these key stakeholders are included in the Stage 1 development of the master plan. Thank you.
Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'd like to start by adding my thanks for everyone's fantastic work in getting us through the lockdown and the many thousands of kindnesses shown by people around the city. I'd like to thank the officers and indeed all my colleagues for what has happened. So I'm just going to say a bit about transport. And the lockdown gave people a real zest for traffic-free streets and clean air. And it was a joy to walk and cycle without fear of road danger and to see families and small children on bikes. And more people working from home showed that not everyone needs to commute 5 days a week. But to comment on the recovery plan's main action relating to transport, which is continue to identify opportunities to promote sustainable travel in the city centre, my view is that it needs more ambition in achieving a better future based on a net zero economy, meeting a 13% cut year on year in carbon emissions to stay within safe limits, a fair society and a healthy environment. This action falls short of the Transport Minister's exhortation to use the COVID crisis as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver a lasting transformative change in how we make short journeys in our towns and cities. As the Minister points out, 40% of journeys are under 2 miles, which is really quite incredible. Green councillors would want to see included in the recovery plan the Transport Minister's reference to whole route approaches involving the creation of corridors for buses, cycles, and access only on key routes into town and city centre. Building on the recovery plan, as the recovery plan says, measures already in place. To start with, we'd like to see most of the whole area inside the outer ring road made 20 miles per hour. In the medium term, we'd like to see local councils adopt a zero strategy for deaths and serious injuries as adopted by the London Mayor. We would also like to see support highlighted for reducing road traffic overall across the whole of Norwich and indeed across Greater Norwich. But before anyone says that the City Council is not the Highways Authority, I'd point out that the City Council has a big influence over transport, even though highways responsibilities have shifted to the County Council. City Cabinet members sit on several important bodies which shape and fund transport infrastructure, and the City Council is a transport consultee on major schemes. The Council is also the local planning authority and it sets local car parking standards. In using housing regeneration as a tool for recovery, we'd like the City Council to adopt a sustainable green transport and traffic neutral approach in master planning East Norwich. The Greater Norwich also needs to find new sources of funding. Beg your pardon?
Can you start winding up, please? You've had 3 minutes.
Okay, then, yeah. Sources of funding for green transport. We'd like the city to join with bodies such as the Automobile Association to lobby the government to replace fuel duty in vehicle exercise duty, which will fall as cars become electric. And this money should be ring-fenced for road maintenance and green infrastructure, green transport infrastructure. So we have at present a narrow window of opportunity for creating a green transport future, and I hope the Council's recovery plan will seize the moment.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Lubbock.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to be speaking immediately after Councillor Carlow because it is on the same subject, and I do agree with so much of what she's said. It's the response in this blueprint to transport that I really find wanting. COVID has given us opportunities to increase behaviour change that has taken place for walking and cycling in a way that we really hadn't managed to do beforehand. So it seems such a pity that we are not immediately responding to the needs of those people who have taken up walking and cycling and want to continue to do so, but are very much frightened by the amount of traffic and the speed of traffic. And it's those two issues that will prevent them from continuing to be active in their travel plans. So I think although this blueprint is very wide-ranging and it is a strategic document, I think we need a far more immediate response to the advantages that have come out of COVID. And my goodness, there haven't been many advantages, but to see our streets, as Denise said, so quiet and so inviting for people to walk and cycle, we can't lose the advantage that we've now got. So although I hear what Councillor Stannard says about careful planning, many other authorities have gone for it and said, look, let's put the cones down the road, let's get the cycle tracks in, let's widen the pavements and let's close that road. They know that this is an ideal opportunity to put things in place, albeit temporary, but then to monitor with a view to it becoming permanent. And I feel that to have the 2 road closures really does show a lack of ambition. Councillor Waters said we should be listening and working with our communities. The community in Eton here have told me that they are fearful of continuing to cycle and walk because of the speed of the traffic. There's less traffic perhaps, but it is definitely travelling faster. So a simple way of dealing with this would be to have 20-mile-per-hour limits throughout the whole of the city, even on those radial routes and the ring road, and it put them in place. Traffic regulation orders can be put in place, and I understand some local authorities are doing it, a lot of it, because the government are waiving the cost of it. So there are ways of finding low-cost measures to make cycling more compatible with transport, and the most cost-efficient way is to make the traffic slow down. So I think we are not being ambitious enough. As Denise says, we are not the we do have influence, and I think we need a more immediate response to transport to take advantage of the changes that have taken place. And I think we ought to bring those changes forward now, and not just the few remarks that are made in the blueprint. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Lord Mayor, before I begin, I must too thank and congratulate our officers for presenting such an assiduously researched, comprehensive and all-encompassing report. The plan has all the hallmarks of a city with an understanding of the complexities of place, how a city actually functions, and the responsibilities and duties that grow from these. As a city that is compassionate and that works for all of its citizens, businesses and visitors, it is a city that has made a peerless response to the emergency and now has a clear eye on the future. I will briefly expand on 2 aspects of the report: rough sleeping and the environment. Since I spoke at the launch of our Pathways project nearly 2 years ago, I've had the privilege of watching them work together under one badge with the mantra of no wrong door. This innovative move, which brought together statutory agencies and charities, has been admirably successful. It became a well-oiled machine. So when the emergency arose, there were plenty there with a robust plan. Norwich City Council officers played their part in the project. They have roofed our rough sleepers and fed them. In consequence, they have nurtured them to new futures. Almost all have now moved on to more permanent accommodation. The blueprint shows how our environmental strategy is too important to be corralled into one topic, especially because of the Norwich 2040 vision. There are environmental implications and considerations throughout. All contribute to improving Norwich's environment, all contribute to a reduction of the city's carbon footprint. For example, theme 1 will result in more staff working from home, more Zoom meetings, more access online for customers. All will be saved from travelling into City Hall. Theme 2 involves our work to reduce fuel poverty with retrofitted insulation, fitting of thermodynamic hot water systems, cheaper renewable energy via raw power, and so on. Theme 3 promotes sustainable travel and our use of local businesses, contractors and their subcontractors. In the case of our environmental showcase, Goldsmith Street, 92% of all subcontractors were from local SMEs. There were 5 apprentices working and learning on site at its peak. Theme 4 is exemplified by our policies of new build to passive house or near passive house standard, which clearly reduces our impact on the environment, and so it goes on. The environmental theme is made explicit in Theme 7, but the environmental, social and economic concerns are blended together throughout this document. The Climate, Environmental Emergency Executive Panel, CEEP, will no doubt push this as far as possible. The new environmental strategy reflects this. Lord Mayor, this is a blueprint that is welcome. It's a visionary plan for Norwich's environment in a way that serves and enhances all sectors of the city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Utton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I've got a problem with the report because I think we've got the cause wrong. Because all the way through the report, it talks about COVID-19, and yet only 15 people died in Norwich from COVID-19. The statistics are absolutely minuscule. And if you compare that to the number of people who normally die of the flu in Norwich, it is far less. Also, the report compares the current situation to World War II. According to the EDP, 1,092 people died in Norwich during World War II, and there were far fewer people living here then. So the problem isn't COVID-19, which is a little virus that affects very, very few people. It's actually the government's response. And the government's response, we can see what they did. Neil Ferguson, who predicted all the numbers, was off having an affair and breaking all the rules. Dominic Cummings was off breaking all the rules. Now, these were people right at the centre of decision-making in government, and they were breaking their own rules because they know that COVID-19 is not what it's purported to be. We can't compare this to World War II. The only way I could think, is in terms of Dad's Army and Corporal Jones running around screaming, "Don't panic." A result of the lockup that the government has imposed on us all, an increase in suicides, an increase in heart attacks, oncologists predicting that over 60,000 people are going to die from cancer because they have gone undiagnosed because the NHS has shut down for everything apart from COVID-19. There's a complete lack of preventative medicine. Unemployment is going through the roof. I'm a small businessman in Norwich. I have had to close my business in Norwich. I've had to move out of Norwich because I can't afford to carry on. And today we hear on the BBC that children are suffering from PTSD, something that I predicted right at the beginning of all this, not because of COVID, but because of the ridiculous reaction of our government. COVID is the biggest con in history. We need to get back to normal. We need to open the parks. We need to open the schools fully. We need to get people back to work and stop the panic. That's the problem I have with this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I'm kind of pleased I get to go next because as a nurse who has worked through this pandemic, I am absolutely gobsmacked by that. This was no little virus. For all my colleagues and the nurses I trained with who worked either at the Mental Health Trust or at the Norfolk and Norwich, some in critical care, this was not a little thing. This has been terrifying, anxiety-provoking for both the general population, but also the frontline staff who are taking very, very careful precautions. And I've not been in this world of walking and cycling, I'm afraid. I've been at work. So I'm a little bit gobsmacked by what was just said there because, and yeah, just really it's taken my breath away slightly. So I suppose I'd wanted to talk about the very real effect on people because that's what I've been dealing with, but also where that comes up in the report. And it's about people who live in the private rented sector. And I'm so pleased to see that's mentioned. We've got 22% of the population living in the private rented sector. And it's the kind of problem that we haven't seen the full extent of yet. And Robert Jenrick had the audacity to say that the government was doing so much for private renters, but he's extended the eviction ban. Great, it's a sticking plaster. But actually the local housing allowance isn't sufficient. And we've yet to have the results of the consultation on Section 21. So I'm just really pleased that we've got this mentioned because these are a lot of people who are going to experience incredible hardship, families that won't know where they can live if they're faced with eviction shortly, children that education has already been disrupted, will have to be again as they move homes. So I'm really glad that we've taken what's in this report already and have been developing an action plan from that, and that Cabinet have been talking about that, and we've got many things we're hoping to do. So yeah, just really pleased to see private renters in here, but I really hope that my colleagues don't share that feeling around COVID. because the nurses, the key workers, the people who have been providing food in shops for us all and working in healthcare and social care, that's a bit of a kick in the teeth, if I'm honest. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, you lost me there. Oh, right, the chat. Right, sorry, yes. Okay. Yeah, just a reminder, the chat function is just to indicate whether you want to speak. It's not chat, it just relates to the meeting. It's just a reminder. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am absolutely staggered by Councillor Utton's response to COVID. It may be that only 15 people have died in Norwich, but personally, I've known 2 of those people and their families are utterly destroyed. This is not something to be taken lightly. This is not some kind of conspiracy theory that we need to brush under the carpet and pretend it's not happening. I'm absolutely staggered. Absolutely staggered. This government has not followed the science. If it had followed the science, we wouldn't be reducing this to 1 metre by now. The children wouldn't be going back to school. You know, that if anything, they are ending lockdown too early, not too late. But that's not really what I came on to talk about. I came to talk on about the recovery document. But I'm just shocked, really, really shocked by your response. I wanted to talk about the food bank that I've been running with other Labour councillors and the synagogue and the amazing COVID-19 response groups. And one of the items that has come up in this, and it is about paying people's council tax reduction who've lost their jobs or people who've fallen into that category. Somebody came in last week and he said, I haven't come to use the food bank, I've come to donate. But if my council tax wasn't being paid, I would be using this food bank. So he came in to thank the city council. He said, I can now feed myself and feed my son. And he said, if I hadn't had that fallback, he was self-employed, so he'd been without income. He said, I would be using this food bank myself. So I just wanted to highlight how important it is and what it means to people to not be spending money on council tax and instead actually being able to buy food to support themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stiltley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I welcome the announcement today by the government of that will enable hospitality industry, large amounts of it, to open up on the 4th of July. I hope our businesses in the city consider that the changes and related conditions are deliverable. This will obviously help the city get back on its feet. I trust this council will continue to work with county council, operators and third parties to open up public spaces where we can. And I urge the public to help make the measures work safely. I look forward to joining you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stannard.
Well, I did want to talk about highways, and I will in a moment, but I too want to come back and respond to Councillor Utton. I'm absolutely horrified to hear what he had to say. Again, I'm an ex-NHS worker, 25 years in the NHS, and indeed I was involved in developing the response to the SARS epidemic in 2005, which fortunately didn't make it here. And much of the work that was being done around the country then by public health specialists and others, and I chaired a group of such people who was working on plans. Much of that work is what was implemented by the government now. Not fully, not early enough, but actually it's based on good, hard science. And I have to say to Councillor Utton, if COVID is the biggest con in history, have you any idea how much of a cover-up there would need to be around the world of so many people, of so many scientists and professionals? It beggars belief that anyone would suggest that. One of the reasons for lockdown is that Imperial College calculated, and this hasn't been refuted, that if the government didn't lock down and left us to try and achieve herd immunity, there would be 500,000 people needing hospital treatment and NHS would fail. That's the reason why it was done. And we can see now from the reduction in the R rate and the reduction in the incidence of COVID-19 that has worked. I agree also that the lockdown is being lifted too quickly for political reasons. We need to get the message out there to people that it's still in circulation, it's still dangerous, you could still catch it. And in terms of a risk assessment, whilst the likelihood of catching it and developing symptoms might be small, the severity of doing that is absolutely critical and something that any sane, rational person would want to avoid. So as I say, we need to get, I think it's irresponsible actually to suggest to people that there is no risk at the moment. And Cummings and others didn't know something that we don't know about the virus. They and Johnson as well were reckless and put themselves needlessly at risk. So my message is it's still out there. It's not safe to stop taking precautions. You must carry on taking precautions. And I say that to every member of the public who is watching this. And I say that again, and Councillor Beth has also said this as an ex-NHS, she's current NHS, ex-NHS, with an understanding of these matters. I just want to say, if you'll stop me when I've run out of time, Councillor Thomas, but in terms of the transport issues, I mean, we do intend to be ambitious and to learn from and take advantage of behaviour changes that we've seen during the pandemic, more walking and cycling, more remote working, all of that.
That's the 3 minutes, Councillor Starr.
How much longer?
That's the 3 minutes.
Oh, it's done. I think the point I did make about COVID was far more important than any transport point I might have made. But anyway, just to say we are being ambitious on transport.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Mike Sands.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I agree with Councillor Utton on one thing, and that is that the government has handled this COVID crisis absolutely abysmally. There is not one single aspect that they have handled well, from Operation Cygnus in 2016 right the way through to the arrival of the virus in January, February, and right through to the present. However, COVID is not a little thing. I've just had a look. 32,000 people died in Britain during the whole of the Blitz. Yet, since the virus arrived in Britain, the government's own figures put total deaths at well over 40,000. The Office of National Statistics add over 20,000 more to this, making way in excess of 60,000, because they also include people who died in their own homes and in care homes. We must be thankful, perhaps, that Norwich has been relatively lightly hit by COVID. For once, being at the end of the road and rail system has played to our advantage, but it is no little thing. We must be very wary of this virus and continue to take it seriously.
Thank you. Councillor Packer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to echo the views put forward by my Labour colleagues. This is indeed a visionary blueprint. In response to Councillor Utton, it is news to me that we need to open our parks, as they have remained open. Playgrounds have been closed to prevent the spread of COVID-19. You may disagree, but if just one child has been saved through this action, then in my view, it has been a success. We cannot gamble with our children's lives. Throughout this crisis, we have kept our parks, open spaces, and our much valued allotments open. This has not been the case for all councils. We recognise how vitally important it is for our residents' physical and mental health and well-being to be able to access these spaces, and we will continue to invest in them. I want to take this opportunity to thank our residents for using our parks and open spaces in a responsible manner during this difficult time. I would also like to thank the enormous contribution our residents have made in looking out for and helping each other. It's been truly inspiring to see at firsthand so much commitment, kindness, and generosity. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Schmierer.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Sorry, I'm just unmuting myself. So I'd like to start by associating myself with all those councillors who, first of all, have thanked the hard work and altruism of those many thousands of individuals who have volunteered their time, their passions and their energies in response to this crisis. And it is a crisis. And it is right that action was taken. So the second thing I would like to do is associate myself with, and I presume the rest of my group, with councillors who have spoken to highlight the continued dangers of COVID-19 and the novel coronavirus that causes it in response to Councillor Utton. Others have said all I would like to say on it, and I am sure we are, with the exception of maybe one, in all in agreement that this is no little thing and needs to be taken seriously. But I'd like to return to this report. Indeed, I have spent the last few weeks and indeed months musing on how the current pandemic will affect the way our life is run and led and our society organized. As someone who studied history and having studied previous pandemics, whether they be the Spanish flu of the early 20th century or indeed the Black Death and the subsequent plagues, they did have a major impact. There was a social recalibration. Indeed, it is going to be clear that on the human level, on the economic level, on the social level, this is going to change things. We are going to see a greater number of people working from home, as has been pointed out in this report, and that is a good thing. An increased need for technology is obviously there. But we are also sadly going to see a number of people made redundant and unemployed as a result of the economic changes that our society is going to be beset with. And so I know and I understand that this is obviously on a macro level, but I think this is a time to really reset the clocks, a return to the old normality with all its inherent iniquities is simply not an option. The time for really radical, bold thinking is now. And I am really delighted that this report lays the framework for it, but it could go further, and I would like to see it go further. Let us talk about things like UBI, universal basic income. Let us talk about a revolution in walking and cycling. Let us not simply have a return to the economic inequality of the past. Let us instead have a social levelling and an environmental emancipation. Work that, for example, has been done on homelessness is to be commended, as Councillor Maguire rightly put out. It has meant that the most destitute in our society have been helped and will continue to be helped. And as I say, that is to be commended. Let us see this at the start of a process which changes the way Norwich is run for the better. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Is Councillor Ackroyd back with us? Councillor Ackroyd is having a problem with the computer.
She's having some technical difficulties, Lord Mayor, so won't be able to come back onto the meeting, I think.
Right. Is there any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Erin Fulton McAllister.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to respond to the outrageous and irresponsible comments that were just made by Councillor Utton. As an infectious disease scientist whose PhD did come from Imperial College, in fact, from the department who produced the report that one of my fellow councillors just referred to, I can confirm this is not a small issue. It might be a small virus, which is part of the problem, but it is not a small issue. I'm going to leave his comments there because what I really just wanted to do was to thank the officers, thank the councillors who've worked so hard on this blueprint, and also thank, as well as all of those residents who've already been rightly thanked a number of times now by fellow councillors. I want to thank all of those people who have behaved responsibly, who have followed the guidelines, which have been frankly unclear and confusing to a lot of people, but to those who have done their best, who have made massive sacrifices to limit the number of deaths to where they have been, thank you. We really needed that response from everybody. And please, can I urge people who are listening into this meeting to please keep taking it seriously. Please keep limiting your social interactions and doing everything you can to limit the spread and keep the number of infections and deaths as low as you possibly can, because this is serious. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Sue Sands.
Okay, I'm probably going to be unpopular in what I'm going to say, but here we go. I just wanted to say, first of all, I'm sorry, Councillor Otten, that your business has failed and that you're unable to continue in it. That is a real shame, along with all the other businesses that have gone because of this virus, and there's going to be an awful situation when it's finally over. I also wanted to say that I'm one of the 2.5 million people that has to shield because of various health problems. But I'm also a teacher, and when you're saying that schools need to go back, if I went back now to my school and taught the children in my class, children who have parents who are also going back to work, for me to catch COVID-19 would be a very serious issue indeed. And also, the problems that all schools are facing, the one where I teach included, of trying to keep children apart, trying to keep 4-year-olds apart, trying to keep even year 6s apart, is massive. And unless you've got a large school where you can spread them out all over the place, and my school is physically, the buildings are not large, then it's an impossible thing to do. So yes, right, you might politely say schools have got to be back, but unless you're in that situation where you're trying to achieve that, you really don't have the understanding. But I am sorry about your business, I truly am.
Thank you. Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't going to speak, but Councillor Utting has made me speak up to a point. My wife was one of these 2 million people who's been in lockdown. She received another letter today. I don't know if Sue received one today from the government advising them to stay in a bit longer. So we're all looking forward to that. My real worry on this is we're actually moving too quick as a city council to open up the city again. We'll put all these measures in for 2 metres. The government's now changed that tonight to 1 metre in certain places where you can't keep 2 metres away. We've spent this money. We've been open for the last week or two. I think why we've done well in noise for the amount of deaths, and the ones we had are really, really sad to think about their families and what they're actually going through. But I think the public in noise have done really well and are abided by staying in and not going out and mixing and stuff like that. I think the citizens of Norwich should be proud of this, but I should just tell them also to be very careful. I mean, this is now opening up. We're now opening up the city for people to make money. This isn't opening up to get rid of the COVID-19 or to put a stop on the COVID-19. We're actually opening up the city now. The distancing is gone, the lockdowns are gone. Now, we had just as many people die before we actually shut down. We should have shut down 2 or 3 weeks before we even started. And I believe that we should be locked in again for at least another 2 weeks, I believe, until the figures are really gone right down. There's just too many people being tested positive. And we ain't heard anything from the government about the people who are on lockdown, who they've met, and if they're actually contacting them properly. I think there was something like 65% on the first lot, which went through the first day, but I haven't heard any figures later. So that really worried me. There's still a lot of people being tested. There's still something like 6% of the country got coronavirus, and that is a lot of people. And this is the figures they gave out today as well. my worry is this government has crippled city councils, county councils, by promising to pay anything that they can do to stop this coronavirus coming through. I think Norwich has done a fantastic job. Norfolk has not done bad at all, really. And I think the government should be held to account to actually pay up and look big. But I'm still a bit worried about opening up the city, and I won't be going down there anyway. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Driver. Are there any other councillors who wish to contribute? No? Okay. I'll now move for Councillor Waters. Sorry. Sorry. Councillor Waters, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And can I thank all of my colleagues for their varied contributions in terms of suggestions going forward and their comments and thoughts. So I will just run through some of the themes which I think have been highlighted. So I just want to remind everybody that this is a citywide strategy. We've been a key institution, but we've not been alone, as some people have mentioned. And it's really going to be the city in what will remain very uncertain times. Councillor Driver is right. The coronavirus has not gone away. It's still with us. We have the delights of Brexit at the end of the year. So there's a high degree of uncertainty around, but the best thing we are able to do to deal with that uncertainty is to mobilise all the resources of our city and get the benefit of people's knowledge and expertise across Norwich. And 2040 vision partnership is key to that. Commercial investments have come up. I mean, it's slightly Groundhog Day-ish, I have to say. We've had commercial investments for many, many decades, and those have not been controversial. I don't remember that being an issue in the past, but there is at least some vague recognition that with the end of revenue support grant, the council had to look at alternative ways of generating income, and those investments are for the long term. And if there are some downs, there'll be some ups as well. So those are still valuable assets to us. One of these days, I will have from colleagues in the Green Group a worked up, detailed commercial plan about investment in sort of green financial instruments or infrastructure. And that will be able to demonstrate to us what the costs of that will be and what the returns will be and over what period. So if any of you could come up with at least one or two detailed proposals, those would be welcome to put into the mix, and that would be a really good thing to see. A lot of talk about transport. Just remind colleagues that in Norwich we start from a very high base, begun over 50 years ago with the pedestrianisation of London Street. So a number of councils who are doing some work in this area. That's very commendable. I've seen television clips of those initiatives. Are perhaps behind us in the curve when it comes to the degree of pedestrianisation and cycle routes that have been formed part of the walking and cycling infrastructure. My concern at this particular time is probably more with public transport. The funding model for buses and trains has been effectively demolished. And unless there is significant public funding for those forms of transport, we will be in a situation where there will be a paucity of that other element of transport that we have long argued for improving through the Transforming Cities programme and so on. And if we're going to talk about a commercial success with a green core to it, as it were, it would be with the energy company.
we have.
One minute now, please, Councillor.
Okay, I will. So, you know, we've got strong green energy credentials, and that's both socially useful and commercially successful. And the work is underway for widening roads, widening pavements. I think some colleagues are a little bit preemptive, saying, why haven't you done this right now? Well, actually, we are doing it right now, and it would be reasonable to allow us a couple of weeks, given that this is a county function, but we're leading on these things and we're preparing the ground for a more extensive opening of the city. So, in conclusion, thank you for the contributions. Engage with it positively, bring ideas to the table, in some cases cost some of those ideas. And can I just add my thanks to everybody involved? And can I thank in particular personally the work that the Chief Executive has done on this recovery programme.
Thank you. Right, we'll now move to the vote, and can I ask you to make sure that your video is on, obviously, in the way we're going to be voting, to keep your hands up until you've been counted. So all those in favour? Thank you, that's 35. All those against, you'd like to put your hand up? One. And abstentions? I think Councillor Ackroyd's not back yet. No. It's nil. Okay, I can confirm the resolution has been carried. Thank you. So now we're going to have a 5-minute break. I'll even time myself. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I call upon Councillor Waters to move item 7.
Okay, Lord Mayor, so what we're being asked to do this evening, we're being asked to make a commercial decision to provide an additional loan facility to the Norwich Regeneration Company in the context of COVID-19. And I just want to set a little bit of context, just to remind people what the purpose of Norwich Regeneration Company is. So it's a wholly owned city council company. It was established in 2015. And it's got 3 main purposes. And it's to help the council meet housing need and to build properties to a high environmental standard. It enables the council to take a more commercial approach to generating income, as well as varying range of housing we're able to provide for the council at the time of budget austerity. And it has been a company that's worked with other organisations, both inside and outside the council, to help build around those houses, that it builds stronger neighbourhoods, and those have the beneficial spin-offs of things like social inclusion, employment and education. So in addition to the work started at Rain Park in Bowthorpe in 2017 to deliver 170 homes, both private tenure and council housing, the council has built through the Regeneration Company, invested in a number of other housing initiatives in the preparation for housing development, some of which we touched on in the previous report. And so if I take us forward to November 2019, contract negotiations were successfully completed for further sections of the Bowthorpe development to be pushed forward with a loan of £11.4 million.
And as recently as March 2020, the Cabinet approved a pipeline of other housing schemes, putting in a requirement that the company return to making an annual profit within 5 years. So that business plan was put in place. Can I say during the course of that first 5 years, a number of lessons were learned about the more effective operation of the company, and most recently we have appointed 2 non-executive directors, bringing their particular expertise to the future work of the board. So much of this report picks up the fact that the impact of COVID has changed the landscape, and everybody has acknowledged that in the last discussion we had. Governments are putting in, I think, something in the order of £400 billion to ensure that businesses remain viable through this extraordinarily difficult period. So what do we know? We know that the housing market has changed. The report contains details of assessments by the Bank of England, by commercial companies who specialise in the housing market, and it would suggest that the reductions in values of homes probably is in a range between 5 and 20%. So in those difficult circumstances, the company's written to the council to request an increased loan facility of up to £21 million, up from £11.4 million. Loans incidentally made on a commercial basis, so that's Bank of England base rate plus 4.5%, and some additional equity investment. So there is nothing exceptional to that in an exceptional situation. So the council has to consider 2 options, because this is an adjustment to the budget that was passed in February. The first is to make the loan. The second is to crystallise the losses and not make the loan. Now, if you have worked through the figures, you will see that actually providing that loan with the appropriate level of interest charged on those loans, that actually the costs of maintaining the company, enabling it to continue its good work in terms of building much needed housing across a number of tenures, compares more favourably than if we decided not to provide that loan to the company. It is unclear about how much of a liability we would pick up, because in addition to the figures that roughly show it around about £1 million difference in terms of option 1 being better than option 2, there would be an unspecified amount of compensation to the developers, the builders. It clearly has required us as a council to make sure that we have a reserve in place to enable us to deal with unforeseen contingencies. That is a sensible measure. But the outcome of it will be ultimately that the council will have assets that it owns. If we bankrupted the company, those assets would be distressed assets and they would fall out of our hands. And that we've got the opportunity to look at a future commissioning model which draws on the housing revenue account in terms of moving forward, rebalancing at this particular time, because the housing market is flat on its back in a general way, on building affordable council homes where we have strong funding streams through the HRA. So the reality is that whatever people may have said about the past, and goodness knows this has been discussed on many occasions in council in a very transparent way. The logical decision is to accept the recommendation, which that we should provide those loan facilities to enable the company to continue the valued work, which is at the heart of our recovery plan, which is to regenerate through housing and provide much needed housing to different groups of people across the city. I move the recommendations, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Harris to second the item.
Yeah, happy to formally second the item and reserve the right to speak. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'd firstly like to thank officers for the report and recommendations before us. I fully support the aims and aspirations of the company as a vehicle to create profits to finance council housing of a high environmental standard. Although the decision councillors are being asked to make today is due to new unforeseen circumstances, it is still regrettable that the council got into a negative situation in the first place. And to quote the EDP, naivety and arrogance is no excuse. I shall not repeat what the national magazine Private Eye had to say. I understand that this new request has been brought to us because of a change in the build programme sequencing of the council's project at Rains Park and the uncertainty of COVID-19 consequences. The requirement to build the show house and first tranche of houses near the Dry Lagoon area means extra front loading of costs. I assume these changes are on the advice of the newly appointed marketing agents. I'm also assuming had professional agents of that calibre been in place at the beginning, then these would have already been in the plan and part of the original costings. I am therefore satisfied that NRL needs cash financing for this newly recognised proposal. Now, the issue regarding the uncertainty of COVID-19 and the various analyses of what might happen with sales slippage and sales values are possibilities, not certainties. Yes, it is sensible to number crunch these down to a consensus of worst case scenarios, and I do suggest financial drawdown facilities to accommodate this. However, even though belatedly we have an experienced managing director at the helm, supported by the correct calibre of marketing agents, what has been missing is proper governance of the company. How can cabinet members make decisions on financing NRL while at the same time sitting on the board of NRL, effectively asking themselves for money? The Green Group has been challenging this for a long time, and auditors have also recognised this crucial flaw. The Green Party Chair of Order has been highlighting the inappropriate governance of NRL for ages. I also raised the governance issues again 20 weeks ago with the need for independent directors, and was reassured it would be a consideration to bring in non-executive directors with the appropriate knowledge and expertise. It is good to hear, but only this evening, that 2 independent non-executive directors have finally been appointed. But why have heels been dragged to get to this place? If the Labour cabinet ignores the views of other councillors in its decision-making and keeps information from the public, it must then take full responsibility for those decisions and not be afraid of letting council taxpayers know about them. So although I do not think at this stage in the company's recovery we should force it into liquidation, I cannot at this point support giving these sums of financial support until the 2 non-executive directors have had an opportunity to assess the proposals. It would be even better to have 3 experienced non-executive directors taken on and reduce cabinet member representation to just 1, so the majority of the board would not have potential vested interests with the council. Finally, because of the bad decisions made on the start-up structure of NRL and subsequent resistance to correct those decisions, I asked that the 2 cabinet members currently on the board do the honourable thing and either resign from the NRL board or resign from the cabinet to avoid continuing this blatant conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The notion of councils owning housing companies is something that I've been interested in for a while. And so in 2015, when I saw that this council was establishing Norwich Regeneration Limited, I fully supported the project. The aspirations of helping the council to meet housing need, building properties to high environmental standards, and taking a more commercial approach to generate income for the council in a time of budget austerity is worthy. But somewhere along the way, things have not gone according to plan. When this item came to Cabinet just under a fortnight ago, I was very impressed by the presentation given by Dave Shaw, Managing Director of NRL, and don't doubt that he has the capacity and confidence moving forward with other developments. But Rain Park presents a problem for the company and for this council as shareholders. The sums being talked about this evening represent a significant increase from 11.4 million in just November last year to 21 million now. Granted, nobody could have predicted back then COVID-19, but concerns had been raised about governance of the company. The news received at Cabinet about the appointment of non-exec directors may well go some way to address the governance issues that are not unique to NRL and Norwich City Council. At the Centre for Public Scrutiny conference in December last year, a large part of the agenda was given over to themes around commercial investment and governance thereof. There was discussion about whether cabinet members and officers are the best people to serve on the board of an arm's length company, or should the council seek to hire external experts. Therefore, while the appointment of non-exec directors is important, I would still like to see the council do more to use its position as shareholder through, say, the audit committee to hold the company to account in more detail about the running of the business. Rain Park is an area where there should be a strong rental market, and I would like to see some further work on keeping the houses within the company for private rent rather than take lower sale amounts if that's what's needed. To conclude, I just don't feel confident at this stage to support this report and the further funding without some additional strengthening of the governance arrangements, perhaps even knowing the names of the non-exec directors. Thank you.
Thank you. I've received notice that some members would want to contribute to the discussion. I'd like to call Councillor Price.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Green councillors wish to see housing built to the highest environmental standards delivered in the city. We also have sympathy with the financial pressures placed upon the administration to deliver services due to the withdrawal of the central government grant. In 2015, the administration took a bold step to attempt to address this situation by setting up a wholly owned private housing company. What has since transpired is that this was implemented with a great deal of naivety and unforgivably without acceptable challenge, scrutiny or knowledge from the Cabinet. This viewpoint is confirmed by comments made by one of those Cabinet members charged with these responsibilities as recently as this month's Cabinet meeting. I quote, "It makes it a lot easier for me now to start to understand the decisions that we're making. We're a lot more informed now on the decisions we're having to make." Green councillors have attempted to work constructively with the administration and also on behalf of the residents of this city who ultimately provide the funding by consistently raising legitimate concerns about the risks associated with this venture and challenge the assumed outcomes that were presented to us, a role that I feel should have been better undertaken by the Cabinet itself. We were told consistently by the decision makers that our concerns were unfounded. Ultimately, the failures were only identified by the hard work of the audit committee, not by the administration and not by the Cabinet. Absurdly, these failures are still to be fully addressed over a year later. When I spoke to this council in November, I made it very clear that I feel there is a massive conflict of interest on the NRL board, which comprised of 2 Cabinet members and 2 senior officers, including the Chief Finance Officer. The borrowers are also, in effect, the lenders. I called for those board members to stand down. I believe they should take responsibility for the mistakes and stand down now. I accept that the impacts of COVID-19 have been unpredictable, But with the unprecedented levels of uncertainty surrounding investments, the housing market, jobs, and the economy it has brought, we now have a business proposal from NRL for an increased investment that builds in a potential trading loss of £10.4 million. That's a large increase on the £6 million NRL is already forecast to lose. The real need for this extra funding is due to the earlier failures in the conception, management, and implementation of this company. The proposals in front of us today could well be the most pragmatic and prudent solution, but it is impossible for Green councillors to support the administration while there is still a lack of professional skills and governance operating within this company. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lubbock.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In view of the previous track record of NRL and its loss of £6 million of public money, I do not feel there is sufficient knowledge and expertise on behalf of the directors of the company to oversee the next phase of the development. There is a particular concern in the context of COVID-19 with regard to the economy and house prices. If councils do enter the world of housing development, then they are mixing with experienced players, and one would have thought that those that they appoint to oversee the development company would have experience and knowledge of the housing business, and also that they be extremely well advised by a good legal team, neither of which seem to have been the case with NRL. Going forward to the next phase of the Rain Park development, I do not feel that anything has changed other than the appointment of a managing director and 2 non-executive directors. The original directors are still in place. So I do not feel able to support the further lending of millions of pounds of public money to RNL. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't a cabinet member at the beginning of NRL, and it's been a very interesting process to begin to understand it. And we can all look at the past and go over it again and again, but ultimately our city needs houses, and our city needs high quality houses. Because the thing that worries me most and the thing I deal with most in my portfolio is poor standards of housing. And far too many people in our city, particularly in private rented, but across also owner occupiers, are living in poor quality housing. And I don't think anyone who has spoken with Dave Shaw or who has had the pleasure of being shown round by him up at Rain Park can doubt the high quality of what he is trying to achieve. And I wish we weren't in this situation in terms of COVID and the finances around that, but I think we have the right managing director in place who, you know, you cannot fail to be convinced when you talk through the process with him and his ambition and the logic of it. So I am very pleased, whilst I wasn't at the beginning of the process from Cabinet, to now be in that and to give it my full support today.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors? Councillor Driver.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I was on the Cabinet at the beginning, and this was my suggestion that the council should go through with it. It took a lot of persuading the council to actually agree to my proposal to set up a company in the first place. And it took me a few months to actually get the Cabinet on side and to look into it and to carry this forward. I'm like James Wright, who's been looking forward to councils doing their own generation companies, and I was all in favour of doing this to save us money. I know we had a bit of a kickback to start with, but I believe this is the right way, and I believe that we should put the extra money in. I believe that we should be taking our own, in our own bit of the council to put council houses in and to put private houses in as well. And this should generate more money and income to Norwich City Council. So I believe we're we're going forward. We've got a new chief exec, and I believe that this is the way forward. And I'm looking forward to seeing all the new housing developments that this company will actually do, instead of giving all the money to the private companies who actually rip us off. I mean, they don't just rip us off for the planning. I mean, they rip us off for how much we have to pay per bricks or how much we have to pay for a bag of cement. I mean, at least we're paying the right thing and not getting ripped off by companies who are just after a profit. Now, I believe this is the way forward, and I've always believed this, and I believe that the council are right to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank the exhaustive work that's been undertaken by officers, the directors of NRL and the managing director of NRL in bringing this very detailed report to us. That commitment to providing such a detailed report must be commended. The increase in the loan facility for NRL gives certainty of build at Rain Park for sections 2 to 4, but will only be drawn down as needed. At this point, I think it might be useful to remind fellow councillors that at the end of the build, we'll have even more good quality homes of mixed tenure, some of which have already been delivered. We also know that the company has a managing director who is doing everything in his power to control costs without sacrificing quality. By front-loading the loan, it enables the company to reposition the show home with the necessary infrastructure for safer access. This is important for any sales marketing. Let us not forget that the company is making loan repayments to the council, providing us with a regular income stream. COVID-19 has caused build delays across the country, and Rain Park at Bothorpe is no exception. There is a level of uncertainty within the housing market due to the economic impact, but we know that people will still need homes and we need to support NRL to build. So moving away from Rain Park, it shouldn't be forgotten that NRL delivered what can only be described as an outstanding renovation project at Bullard Road, transferring the former housing office into 6 new family homes. The energy ratings were improved from E to B to reduce fuel poverty. Storage units were built in to address furniture poverty, and the whole development was delivered on time and within budget. And even better, situated in Catton Grove ward, so the ward I represent. So we have been listening to people on governance. So the 2 non-executive directors have been appointed, and I will also be supporting the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Sands.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As a Bothorpe councillor, I clearly have a deep and abiding interest in what happens in my ward and in particular at Rain Park. While I think all of us regret the financial situation that the development has currently got itself into, there is no sense at all in not supporting this application, so to speak, and we need this to go forward. I certainly have had a good briefing from Dave Shaw, or must be about a year ago now, and I was particularly impressed at the way he explained how he was going to pull the company out of the mire and drag it forward, and how he was going to return it to profit. He did explain to me that, yes, it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it would happen. So I fully support this, and I also pledge as a Bothorpe councillor to keep a very, very close and watchful eye on developments in Rain Park and the rest of 3 Score as it comes forward as well. So I will be supporting this, and I look forward to further development in Rain Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Button.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like my colleague Mike, I'd like to say the development is really sadly, badly needed there. I mean, we've been waiting for this development to be finished since the 1980s. It's all very well saying, yes, the company's had problems in the past, but it does certainly seem that they're now being ironed out and things are in place to go forward, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to go forward to finish the houses that we so badly need, and then to move on to other developments. And I think this is the best way to do it with our own company. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Stones.
Might as well have a full Bowthorpe team speaking about it. I live very close, well, we live very close to where the rain park is being developed. And I've been on the council long enough to remember way back when excuse the slurping in the background, it's my dog having a drink. Remember that this land was sold and then we took it back and then it was sold and things fell through and then the things weren't built. As Sally has said and Mike has said, we desperately need these houses. If any of you who haven't been around Rain Park and had a look at the excellent housing that we've built around there, I urge you to do so. And when we've gone around and spoken to residents about what they feel and what they think of the building, amazing. The comments as councillors that we've had come back from about what a fantastic job has been done by the council by building these houses. Very much needed. As we all know, our council housing stock has diminished over the years, but we need to move forward. There's absolutely no point in us going back to what it was way back when that land was just empty and of course, people causing all sorts of problems on it for us. We do need to build these houses. And although you might have reservations, there's absolutely no point, whatever that was, there's absolutely no point in not going forward, in my opinion. Thank you.
Is that it? Sorry. Okay. Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Packer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would just like to echo Councillor Jones's comments, having been in the same position as her. Our residents desperately need more housing, and central government clearly isn't playing the role it should be. I have full faith in Dave Shaw, his knowledge, experience, enthusiasm, and our future plans to provide high quality housing, which our residents need and deserve. So I will be supporting these recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to correct a couple of errors that were presented earlier on. To start with, it's worth noting that both Paul Kendrick and Mike Stannard withdrew from all financial decisions regarding NRL. It was misreported in Private Eye, but of course, a misreporting, re-reported doesn't make it a truth. So it was incorrect to report what Private Eye had incorrectly reported. I think it's also worth noting that both Councillor Stannard and Councillor Kendrick actually had experience in the private sector. Many different experiences during their working lives. They've advised on boards, of course, and they were advised by a number of very notable groups, and of course that includes Homes England. I think the idea that this was a kind of a coterie or some sort is just not correct. It might also be worth noting, finally, Lord Mayor, that Brexit also might have an effect, in fact, on housing costs and the housing market. It might actually add another 15% to it. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Okay. Right. Councillor Waters, would you like to respond?
I would indeed, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much. The first thing to say is I'm rather disappointed by those opposition members who are going to vote against these recommendations, who would prefer to see us lose significantly more money than if we stay the course and build more homes and, as it were, build our way financially out of the current situation. Second thing, and I'm grateful to Councillor Maguire for picking up the points about Councillors Stonnard and Kendrick. I have to say, Councillor Neal's malign and unpleasant comments do not deserve any further comment from me on the points he was making. The reality is that these new companies, and they are relatively new. I mean, most councils in Norfolk have a housing company, and they are in many ways a response to the failure of central government to build much needed houses over many decades. And so local government looks for solutions to provide much needed homes, as my colleagues have said. And that business plan that came to Cabinet in March was a worked up business plan that would see the business pay the council money on a regular basis and stabilise the financial situation in doing so. So it was a plan, a realistic plan to build our way out of some of the difficulties that we have had earlier on. The flights of fancy about a lack of transparency behind closed doors and the fact that somebody unspecified decided to leak it to private eye. We cannot say who that might be, of course, we do not know. But let us remember as councillors that the 1972 Local Government Act specifies that certain items have to be confidential and below the line. Things about people, commercial contracts. If the council is to do business with any other organisations, the expectation is that in a procurement, that information is kept confidential from other bidders for a contract. So those things are important, and this council makes sure that it only puts the most necessary things below the line, and this report is a demonstration of that. It lays out in its entirety, as have previous reports, what that landscape is. And this is not something which councillors of the administration are only privy to. All cabinet papers, all below the line papers go to every councillor in this city council. And so between 2017 and June 2020, NLR has either been the substantive report or it has been part of it. Yeah, wrap up any second now. So it has gone to the audit committee 12 times, chaired by Councillor Price. It's been to council 11 times. It's been to scrutiny 4 times. In fact, it has been to a council committee available for all councillors to discuss 53 times. That is not a lack of transparency. That is open and transparent policy, and it's an opportunity for every councillor to have their say. So let me just squash that encrusted myth which found its way into Private Eye magazine. So I very much hope colleagues will support the building of new homes, the new opportunities for people to live in good quality housing over the coming period. There are lumps and bumps in the road, that's life. The opportunity now is to see us through that into a better place, and I'm sure we will be able to do that. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move to the vote. Make sure your video is on, please, and we need a show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. It's 23. All those against? Please show of hands. That's 2 against. Abstentions. You just have to bear with me for a minute. It's 10 abstaining. So motion's carried. Thank you. Please bear in mind whether we need to readmit Councillors Kendrick and Stannard to the meeting. So we'll just have a break in a couple of minutes.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I believe our constitution says that meetings shouldn't run over 2.5 hours. So once people are back, I'd like to move that we vote everything else through unopposed.
We'll wait for Councillors Stannard and Kendrick to come back in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am back, Lord Mayor, if you can hear me. Mike Stonard here, but it tells me I can't restart my video because the host has disabled it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he's now asked me to. Better late than never. Hello.
Vaughan, you're muted.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
All right, you can come into the meeting now. Okay. Okay. As 2 hours have passed since the start of the meeting, I need to ask if members are agreeable that the remaining items should be taken as unopposed business. I need to agree this for each item and resolution. So does any member wish to oppose any of the resolutions under item 8? Item 8? No. Does any member wish to oppose any of the resolutions under item 9? Does any member wish to oppose any of the resolutions under item 10? Does any member wish to oppose any item or resolutions under item 11? Councillor Bergline, Councillor Price. Councillor Berrington. Okay. Okay, moving on. Does any member wish to oppose any of the resolutions under item 12? No. Yeah. Can I ask which resolution? Well, it is a resolution 11. Resolution 11. Oh, just back on. Okay, item 11. Everyone there? Can you hear me this time? Yes? Appointments of representatives to outside bodies for 2020-2021. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 11. Councillor Kendrick.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Lovely. Yes, so this is item 11. It really relates to this is appointment of outside bodies. It relates to the Norfolk Crime and Police Committee. Basically, it allows the independent members to remain on as the member of the panel until, because obviously because of the present crisis, there would normally have been a new appointment made, but obviously due to the present COVID crisis, has been decided, obviously with the consent of all the district councils, to actually allow the present post holder to carry on.
Okay, is that it, Councillor Kendrick?
Yes.
I call upon Councillor Bolton to second the item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Formally second, reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite group spokespersons. Councillor Borderline. Can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Sandra.
Hold on, let me check. Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah? Okay. Let's see if I can get my speech up while you can still hear me. So to start with the positive, I would like to say that I'm particularly happy that Councillor Waters has expressed his intention to establish a more regular feedback mechanism to update opposition groups about decision made by the LEP and to take our comments forward to the LEP. This is very welcome and I look forward to a regular conversation in relation to this outside body. I would also just like to very briefly highlight that, of course, the appointment of councillors to the Norfolk Health Scrutiny Committee does not really lie in our hands, but will be made by the Scrutiny Committee. But I think we should not expect any surprises when this appointment will be made by the Scrutiny Committee at their next meeting. Unfortunately, we in the Green Group will not be able to support the appointments to the outside body. This is by no means because we do not support the individual councillors that will represent the council. I'm sure that our colleagues will take these roles seriously and represent the council and our residents with enthusiasm and conscientiousness. However, I have to highlight the fact that no member of the current Green Group, the biggest opposition group, is a representative of any of these bodies. We too do represent the council and represent thousands of residents. This lack of representation from opposition councillors is a very new trend. We all remember the times when some of us were representatives on some of these bodies. And I think this is a dangerous trend which we cannot support. I would just like to highlight one of the bodies, for example, the Norfolk Community Safety Partnership Scrutiny Subpanel. I think, for example, for this panel, it would make sense to have a representative, a member of Mancroft or a similar ward where many of community safety issues are centralized. And then obviously there's the additional matter that we have called for the resignation of the 2 cabinet members on the NRL board. So I'm afraid we cannot support this item tonight, and I'm hopeful that going forward, opposition groups will be able to represent the council on some of these outside bodies again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Bergelein for highlighting the role that the Scrutiny Committee plays in making appointments to some of these committees. I'm comfortable with the report that is here today, and I hope that should any changes take place when the Scrutiny Committee has its work setting programme next month, that we will be able to make the necessary changes. But I'm happy with the report that's before us now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members who want to contribute to the discussion? No?
Could I Councillor Stonard here, could I please, Lord Mayor?
No. Councillor Stonard.
A couple of things. First of all, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of the Green Group in terms of how representation on these bodies work and also why it was different in the past. Basically, if you sit on one of these bodies, you are representing the administration, though you have to be able, for example, to make decisions on support or not support issues and matters on behalf of the administration. There's absolutely no way an opposition non-administration councillor could do that. Frankly, the bodies would ask, why are you here if you can't actually make decisions, if you can't commit the administration? So there is a fundamental misunderstanding there. There was a time when these roles were open to an extent to opposition councillors, but actually that was the time when the Greens held the balance of power and actually where we needed Green support in order to run the council. So yeah, and I did notice when we won overall control, there was a confusion amongst Green councillors as to why things were changing. I don't think it was really fully understood what the situation was. And I'm just going to make a personal comment about the call for me to resign on the basis that I have a conflict of interest and have had a conflict of interest being a cabinet member and a member of the NRL board, which was stated by Councillor Neil and which also is repeated in private eye totally incorrectly. At every decision that has been made affecting the company financially, every decision, I have absented myself from the meeting or not taken part in the discussion to ensure there is no conflict of interest. So the basic premise that is a conflict of interest is wrong. That has been explained by both by our leader, Councillor Waters, and also by Councillor Maguire. You've heard that explained tonight, and yet it doesn't seem to have sunk in because you're still making the same demand on the basis of the same premise, which is incorrect. Given that your premise is incorrect, I shall not be doing that because I have not had a conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors wish to contribute? No one signal? No. Oh, look, it's basically we're through that now. No one wants to contribute.
I think Councillor Bogerline is trying to speak.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to make a.
I have to say you only get to speak once.
Yeah, so we'll just move on. Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
Yes, now I know the specific nature of the Green objections. I agree with what Councillor Stonard has said. These representatives on some many of these outside bodies represent the administration, and it's choice of the people of Norwich that we have a Labour Party administration. They have elected so in election after election, year after year, and that is the simple reality of the situation here in Norwich. So therefore, that is reflected in the appointment of outside bodies.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, make sure your video is switched on. All those in favour, please show a hand. Keep your hands there. We can recount. Thank you. That's 27 for. All those against, please raise your hand. Keep it raised. That's 5 against. Right, abstentions. Three abstentions. The resolution be carried. Thank you. And I believe that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you. Good night.